Janelle stepped out onto the front porch, her bare feet pressing against the sun-warmed wooden planks. A crisp morning breeze carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, but it was laced with something else, anxiety. Her stomach tightened as she took in the sight before her. Bright orange violation notices fluttered from nearly every plant in their newly cultivated garden, the garish papers secured with cheap plastic stakes driven into the soil like warnings from a tyrant. Alex emerged behind her, running a hand through his messy curls. He let out a sharp breath, jaw tightening. Are you kidding me? He stormed down the steps, ripping one of the notices from the ground and reading it aloud. Unauthorized plant species in violation of community aesthetic standards. Must be removed within 7 days to avoid penalty. Are they serious? Janelle crouched beside a patch of purple coneflowers and ran her fingers along the edge of a notice, her pulse rising. We researched everything. Native plants aren't against the HOA rules. Alex crumpled the paper in his fist. Yeah, well, Karen doesn't care about the rules. She cares about control. As if summoned by her name, their next-door neighbor emerged from her pristine, flowerless lawn. Karen was the embodiment of the word polished. Her blonde bob was perfectly sculpted, her pastel cardigan draped over her shoulders like she was the queen of the cul-de-sac. A small, satisfied smile tugged at her lips as she approached. Good morning, neighbors. Her voice had the manufactured cheer of a customer service agent who had long since stopped caring. I see you've received the notices. I do hope you understand, it's nothing personal. Just keeping our community presentable. Janelle rose to her full height, refusing to shrink beneath Karen's gaze. Define presentable. Karen tilted her head, her expression patronizing. Oh honey. You're new here, so I'll explain. People in this neighborhood take pride in uniformity. Lawns should be green, not whatever this is. She gestured vaguely to the garden, where black-eyed Susans, milkweed, and goldenrod swayed gently in the breeze. Butterflies flitted between the blooms, bees hovered lazily. Alex crossed his arms. You mean boring? Because I don't see a single bird, bee, or butterfly in your yard. Karen's smile faltered for the briefest moment before she regained her composure. Wildlife belongs in parks, not front yards. And the HOA agrees, unsightly landscaping lowers property values. I don't make the rules, dear. I just enforce them. Janelle felt heat rise in her chest, a slow burn of irritation. Actually, we read the HOA bylaws cover to cover before moving in. Nowhere does it say we can't have native plants. Karen gave a soft, pitying laugh. It's implied. And considering I am the head of the HOA Beautification Committee, I think I'd know. Alex took a deliberate step forward. And I think you just don't like that you can't control what we do with our yard. Karen's expression hardened, the polite veneer cracking. Suit yourselves. But I'd hate for this to become an issue. She turned on her heel, heading back to her yard, where her chemically treated lawn gleamed unnaturally under the morning sun. Alex exhaled sharply. God, she's insufferable. Janelle watched Karen disappear inside. She's worse than that. She's dangerous. You heard her. This isn't about rules. It's about making us fall in line. A sudden snap from the hedges made them both turn. A small figure stood there, a child maybe 10 years old with dark curls and wide eyes. He looked between them and Karen's house before disappearing down the sidewalk on his scooter. Alex frowned. Was that? Janelle nodded slowly. Karen's kid. They exchanged a look but said nothing more. By afternoon, Janelle had calmed, at least until she heard the sound of a lawnmower starting up next door. A loud, aggressive buzz filled the air, the kind that sent freshly mowed grass flying into the air in a green mist. But Karen wasn't mowing her own lawn. Alex stood at the window, eyes narrowing. Oh hell no. Janelle ran outside just in time to see a man with a gas-powered trimmer stepping onto their property, his sun-beaten cap pulled low over his face. He was systematically slicing down their wildflowers, the ones they had planted by hand just weeks ago. Stop. Janelle ran forward, her heart pounding. Get off our property. The man hesitated, glancing over his shoulder toward Karen's house. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, her expression cool and unwavering. I was told the homeowners requested a cleanup, the landscaper said uncertainly. Janelle's hands clenched into fists. We are the homeowners and we didn't hire you. Karen let out a dramatic sigh and strolled forward. Oh dear. Was there a misunderstanding? Her voice dripped with false concern. I simply assumed you'd be grateful for a little professional help. Alex's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. You trespassed and hired someone to destroy our garden? Are you out of your mind? Karen gave an innocent shrug. I was just looking out for the neighborhood. Besides, he only trimmed a few weeds. Janelle's pulse roared in her ears. They weren't weeds. They were part of a carefully planned ecosystem. Karen pursed her lips, eyes darting toward the landscaper. Oh, too late now. Janelle felt something snap inside her. Her throat tightened with rage, with helplessness, with a burning need to wipe that smug expression off Karen's face. This was war. The landscaper, clearly uncomfortable, muttered an apology and retreated toward his truck. Karen, however, remained, smiling like she had already won. Oh, don't look so upset, dear. You'll see, things just work better when people follow the rules. She turned away, stepping back onto her pristine lawn. Have a lovely evening. Janelle and Alex stood frozen in their ruined garden, the jagged stems of their flowers swaying in the late afternoon breeze. Alex exhaled through his nose. I swear if we don't do something about her, she's going to make our lives hell. Janelle's jaw tightened, the sharp scent of freshly cut plants thick in the air. No, she murmured. She already has. The smell of charred burgers and freshly cut grass lingered in the air, a deceptive calm settling over the neighborhood as the sun dipped below the rooftops. Janelle gripped a plastic cup filled with lukewarm lemonade, her fingers tightening around it every time Karen's grating laughter cut through the chatter of the neighborhood barbecue. Alex leaned in, voice low. I can't believe we're pretending everything's fine after what she pulled. Janelle's jaw tensed. We need to play it smart. If we make a scene here, we look like the problem. We can't let her win. Karen floated effortlessly between groups, her laugh tinkling, her lips perpetually curled into the smug, knowing smile of a woman who had already declared herself the victor. Every so often, she would glance in Janelle's direction as if waiting for her to snap. Janelle wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, she let her gaze drift, scanning the crowd for something, anything, to distract herself from the fire burning in her chest. That's when she saw him. Ryan. He was standing near the grill, casually flipping a burger while listening to one of the neighborhood dads drone on about golf swings. His brown hair was tousled, a sharp contrast to his mother's meticulously polished aesthetic. His t-shirt was wrinkled, his jeans worn at the knees. He looked like he didn't belong here. Maybe that was why Janelle couldn't stop staring. As if sensing her gaze, he glanced up. Their eyes met. He raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly before nodding toward the empty cooler beside him. An invitation. Alex nudged her playfully. You've been making daggers at Karen all night. Go take a break before you actually explode. Janelle hesitated, but only for a moment. She wasn't here to make friends, but talking to someone not in Karen's orbit seemed like a better option than stewing in her own frustration. She crossed the yard, weaving through clusters of chatty neighbors until she reached him. You're new, Ryan said, handing her a soda from the cooler without asking. Janelle cracked it open. Is it that obvious? Ryan glanced toward Karen, who was now deep in conversation with the HOA president. Let's just say my mom doesn't usually take an interest in people unless they're causing trouble. Janelle scoffed. So I've heard. Ryan chuckled, leaning against the cooler. She's been running this place like a dictatorship since I was in middle school. You're not the first person she's tried to strong-arm. Janelle took a sip of her soda, letting the fizz burn down her throat. Yeah. What happened to the others? Ryan sighed, stretching his arms over his head. Most gave up. Easier to comply than fight. She doesn't just play by the rules, she is the rules. Janelle's grip on the can tightened. Well, we're not giving up. Ryan studied her for a long moment before a slow grin spread across his face. Good. She didn't know why, but the way he said it made her stomach flip, like she had somehow passed a test she didn't know she was taking. Their conversation drifted after that: college, work, the absurdity of suburban life. For the first time since moving in, Janelle felt normal, like she wasn't constantly standing at the edge of a battle she hadn't asked for. Then Karen's voice sliced through the air. Ryan. He tensed, his expression shifting to something unreadable before he turned. Karen stood a few feet away, her smile too sharp, too calculated. I didn't realize you and Janelle had met. Ryan's jaw ticked. It's a barbecue, Mom. People talk. Karen's gaze flicked between them, assessing, calculating. Then, like a switch flipping, her expression softened into something sickeningly sweet. Well, I'm glad you're making an effort to be friendly, dear. Her eyes locked onto Janelle's. Though I do hope you won't take advantage of his kindness. Janelle's teeth clenched. I don't need anyone's kindness. Karen's smile widened. Oh, of course not. I just know how difficult things must be for you and Alex, what with all the misunderstandings lately. Ryan cleared his throat. Mom, maybe lay off? Karen didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on Janelle, cold and knowing. Janelle met her gaze head-on. Don't worry, Karen. We're handling things just fine. Karen held the stare for a moment longer before finally stepping back, her voice light and airy. Wonderful. I'd hate to see this turn into a problem. And just like that, she was gone, slipping seamlessly back into the crowd as if the moment had never happened. Ryan exhaled slowly. Yeah. So that's fun. Janelle let out a humorless laugh. How do you deal with that daily? Ryan smirked. Therapy. And a lot of wine. She laughed, the tension in her chest loosening just slightly. As the barbecue wound down, Janelle found herself standing at the edge of her yard, watching Ryan disappear into his house. She told herself it meant nothing, that he was just another neighbor, just another pawn in Karen's game. But later that night, when she found herself smiling at the memory of his smirk, she knew she was lying. A week passed. Karen escalated. First, it was anonymous complaints. Their garden was attracting rodents. False. Their compost bin was a health hazard. It wasn't. Their outdoor lights were too bright. They didn't have any. Then came the letters, official-looking but vague, full of suggestions to help them better integrate into the neighborhood. Janelle and Alex ignored them. Karen didn't like being ignored. One afternoon, Janelle stepped outside to find another HOA notice pinned to their mailbox. But this one wasn't about their yard. It was about a fine. A massive fine. Her stomach dropped as she read the justification. Failure to adhere to community standards. Pending further review by the HOA board. Karen was trying to financially force them out. Janelle's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a garden anymore. This was war. She stormed back inside, slamming the paper onto the counter. She's trying to bleed us dry. Alex ran a hand through his hair. Okay, this is beyond petty. This is insane. Janelle's mind raced. They could fight it, but Karen held too much sway over the board. They needed a different approach, a way to hit her where it hurt. Her phone buzzed. A text. Ryan **, you might want to check the HOA records. My mom's not as clean as she pretends to be. Janelle's pulse quickened. Maybe they had an opening after all. Janelle sat at the kitchen table, staring at Ryan's message, her heart hammering. The words felt like a key dangling just out of reach, promising an escape from Karen's stranglehold on their lives. Alex leaned over her shoulder, reading the text. What does he mean, not as clean as she pretends to be? Janelle shook her head. I don't know, but I'm damn well going to find out. Her fingers flew over her phone's keyboard. Janelle *, what do you know? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Ryan was hesitating. The minutes stretched unbearably. Janelle tapped her fingers against the table, fighting the urge to send another message. Just as she was about to, her phone buzzed again. Ryan *, meet me at the park in an hour. And don't tell anyone, *. Alex exhaled sharply. This feels like a trap. Janelle grabbed her keys. It's a risk I'm willing to take. She arrived at the park just as the last streaks of sunset bled into the horizon. The place was quiet, the playground empty except for a single figure leaning against the swing set. Ryan. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his expression unreadable as she approached. You actually came, he said. Janelle crossed her arms. You made it sound important. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. It is. But you need to promise me something first. Janelle arched an eyebrow. That depends. He hesitated, then exhaled. If this blows up, you didn't hear it from me. That made her pause. Whatever he was about to tell her, it wasn't just neighborhood gossip. I promise, she said, her voice steady. Ryan pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times before holding it out to her. You want dirt on my mom? Here it is. Janelle took the phone, squinting at the screen. It was a series of emails. HOA correspondence. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just the usual bureaucratic nonsense. But as she scrolled, patterns started to emerge. Karen had been funneling HOA funds into personal expenses. Lavish ones. Dinners at high-end restaurants. Weekend getaways. A suspiciously large payment to a landscaping company. One that, according to Ryan, had never actually done any work in the neighborhood. Janelle's stomach twisted. She's been embezzling. Ryan nodded. For years. She covers her tracks well, but she got sloppy with some of the transactions. Janelle scrolled faster, anger bubbling up. Karen had fined them for their yard while she was stealing from the HOA? She's untouchable, Ryan continued, watching her expression. The HOA board worships her. But if this got out, if the right people saw it? Janelle's grip tightened on the phone. She'd lose everything. Ryan nodded. And she'd deserve it. Janelle's mind raced. This was their opening. Karen had built her kingdom on control, on manipulation. But money, that was her foundation. If they could knock that out from under her, she'd crumble. But it had to be public. Karen's downfall had to be spectacular. Janelle handed the phone back, her pulse steady despite the storm raging inside her. I need copies of these. Ryan hesitated. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Janelle met his gaze, fire in her eyes. She started this war. I'm just ending it. The next morning, she and Alex put their plan into motion. They printed the emails. Dozens of pages. They highlighted the most damning details, added copies of bank statements, receipts, and board meeting notes, all carefully sourced from public records and Ryan's inside knowledge. Then they made copies for every single HOA member. By noon, Karen's empire was in flames. The first wave of fallout came in the form of confused and concerned phone calls flooding the HOA board members. Then came the emergency meeting where Karen, for the first time in her reign, found herself on the defensive. Janelle and Alex arrived early, slipping into the community center's fluorescent-lit meeting room. The air buzzed with tension as neighbors trickled in, their faces grim. Many clutched copies of the documents, some marked with angry red ink. Karen sat at the front, her usual polished demeanor slightly cracked. Her smile was tight, her knuckles white against the polished wood of the table. The HOA president, a balding man who usually served as Karen's lapdog, cleared his throat. We're here today to discuss some concerning allegations. Karen let out a sharp, breathy laugh. Allegations? Honestly, it's absurd. This is clearly the work of certain individuals who have a personal vendetta. Her gaze landed on Janelle. Janelle didn't flinch. The president shifted uncomfortably. Karen, the numbers don't lie. He tapped the documents. There are transactions here that have nothing to do with HOA business. Karen waved a manicured hand. I do a lot for this neighborhood. I don't think anyone can argue that. A murmur ran through the room. An older woman, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lived here for decades, lifted her copy of the evidence. So you expect us to believe that a $600 dinner at a steakhouse was for the benefit of the neighborhood? Karen's smile faltered. Another neighbor piped up. Or the trip to a resort. Because last I checked, we don't have board meetings in the Bahamas. More voices joined in. The tide was turning. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. This is being blown out of proportion. You know me. You trust me. Janelle leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp. We trusted you to run the HOA Karen, not to rob it. The words landed. The president sighed, rubbing his temples. Karen, effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full audit. Karen's breath hitched. You can't. And if these allegations prove true, he continued, you'll be permanently removed. The room erupted. Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. For a moment, she looked at Janelle with something close to hatred. Then, without another word, she stormed out. Janelle exhaled slowly, the weight of months of tension finally lifting. Alex squeezed her hand. We did it. But as Janelle watched Karen disappear into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The night air was thick with the weight of everything that had transpired. Janelle stood in her front yard, arms crossed, watching the streetlights flicker. The neighborhood was unusually quiet, as if the entire community was still processing what had just happened. Alex stepped beside her, his voice low. She's not going to take this lying down. Janelle let out a slow breath. I know. Across the street, Karen's house sat in eerie silence. No flickering porch light, no over-manicured presence on the lawn. It was unsettling. Karen had ruled this street like a self-appointed queen for years. And now her kingdom was crumbling. Ryan's text came a few minutes later. Ryan ***, she's furious. Just a heads up, she's not done. ***. Janelle smirked at the screen. Of course she wasn't. That night, Janelle barely slept. The adrenaline of their victory still pulsed through her veins, but beneath it was something sharper, something unresolved. Karen wasn't the type to disappear quietly. And she was right. By morning, the retaliation had begun. Janelle opened the door to find their trash cans overturned, garbage strewn across their driveway. The stench of rotten food filled the crisp morning air. On their front door, a bright red HOA violation notice was taped, clearly a leftover from Karen's reign, repurposed to make a statement. Alex groaned. She's throwing a tantrum. Janelle crouched, plucking the violation notice from the door. Unauthorized modifications to property, it was ridiculous. Their house was completely in line with the neighborhood standards. She's grasping at straws, Alex said, kicking a crumpled fast food bag off the driveway. What's next? Egging our house. But Janelle wasn't worried about small, petty moves. Karen wasn't just vindictive, she was calculated. And she was desperate now. By noon, the police were at their door. A uniformed officer stood on their porch, notebook in hand, Karen hovering behind him like a vulture. We received a report of illegal landscaping and environmental violations, the officer said, his tone neutral. Your neighbor says you're harboring invasive species in your garden. Karen folded her arms, lips pursed in smug satisfaction. Janelle wanted to laugh. This was her big move? She gestured toward the meticulously researched eco-friendly plants in their yard. All of these are native to the area. We even got them approved by a conservation specialist. The officer glanced at Karen. Do you have any proof of violations? Karen bristled. I know what I saw. They're spreading weeds that are going to ruin property values. Janelle turned back to the officer. She's retaliating because she got caught embezzling HOA funds. The officer sighed, clearly exhausted. Unless there's actual proof of a violation, there's nothing to report here. Karen's face darkened, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned and stormed off, her heels clicking against the pavement with barely restrained fury. Alex watched her retreating figure. She's unraveling. Janelle wasn't so sure. Unraveling people were dangerous. And she was right because the next move was far worse. By evening, a letter had been slipped under their door. No HOA header, no official seal. Just a single typed page. Leave. Janelle's pulse quickened as she read it. No threats. No signatures. Just the one word, heavy and unmistakable. Alex cursed under his breath. This is beyond petty. Janelle ran a finger over the paper's edge. She's panicking. Ryan texted again, confirming their suspicions. Ryan ***, she's losing her mind. Says you embarrassed her. She wants you gone. ***. Janelle tightened her grip on her phone. Karen was a cornered animal now. And cornered animals lash out. That night it happened. A loud crash shattered the silence. Janelle bolted upright, heart pounding. Alex was already out of bed, racing toward the window. Holy, his voice caught in his throat. Janelle rushed to his side, following his gaze. Their garden was destroyed. Plants ripped from the soil. Decorative stones smashed. Their carefully cultivated, HOA-approved, native greenery lay in ruins. And in the middle of it all, a single bottle of weed killer sat abandoned in the dirt. Janelle's blood ran cold. Karen had finally crossed the line. Alex clenched his fists. She did this. Janelle nodded, her breath steady despite the fury clawing at her chest. Yeah. And then she smiled. Alex frowned. You're smiling? Janelle turned to him, eyes alight with something dangerous. Because she just gave us exactly what we needed. By morning the neighborhood was buzzing. Janelle and Alex had documented everything, the destruction, the intimidation, the threats. But instead of going to the police first, they went straight to the HOA board. And they brought Ryan. The meeting was packed. Karen was already there, her expression cold, her posture stiff. But something in her eyes flickered when she saw them walk in with evidence. Janelle stood before the board, her voice unwavering. This isn't just about an HOA dispute. This is about harassment. Alex placed the printed photos on the table, clear, irrefutable evidence of the vandalism. Karen destroyed our property. And it wasn't just about a garden. It was about control. Murmurs rippled through the room. Then Ryan stepped forward. And it's not the first time. Karen's head snapped toward him. Ryan. But he ignored her. He turned to the board, his voice steady. My mom has been abusing her power in this community for years. She's bullied people into silence. She's threatened families. And now, when someone finally stood up to her, she escalated to destruction and threats. The HOA president, who had once been firmly in Karen's pocket, looked genuinely disturbed. Karen, is this true? Karen let out a breathless laugh. Oh, come on. You're seriously taking them at their word? She gestured wildly at Janelle and Alex. They've been nothing but trouble since they moved in. Janelle met her gaze evenly. Trouble for you. Because we wouldn't fall in line. More murmurs. Neighbors whispering, shifting uncomfortably. For the first time, Karen was losing them. Janelle delivered the final blow. We've already filed a police report. And considering all the previous harassment, the destruction of property, and the threats. She let the words settle before finishing, "You're looking at a criminal investigation." Karen's face drained of color. Silence fell over the room. Then slowly the HOA president nodded. "Effective immediately, Karen is removed from the HOA board. And if these allegations are confirmed, she will be banned from any future leadership roles in this community." Karen staggered back like the words had physically struck her. Janelle watched her carefully. There was no rage now. No smugness. Only defeat. Ryan met Janelle's gaze, a slow, knowing nod passing between them. It was over. As they left the meeting, Alex exhaled, shaking his head. That was intense. Janelle smiled, stretching her arms like she was shaking off the last bit of tension. Yeah. She glanced back one last time. Karen stood alone in the meeting hall, staring blankly ahead. Powerless. Janelle turned away, stepping into the cool evening air. Victory had never felt so good.